In this video, we're going to take a look at single selection statements, also known as if statements. If you've been following any of our videos, you will know that I've went ahead and already deleted everything we're not going to need. In this video, we're going to take input from the user, their age, and then based on their age, we're going to let them know what movies they're allowed to see. Now, the rating system I'm going to be following is the Motion Picture Association of America. I'm going to exclude the NC-17 ratings, but I'm going to include G, PG, PG-13, and R. So I've already imported the Java utility, the scanner utility. I've already set it up to get input from the keyboard, and I went ahead and created our main method. If you followed any of our videos so far, you will know that this is something we do in every video. Until we get to the actual if statements, everything we do up until that point will be a review. I'm going to have a variable called my age. I'm going to go ahead and initialize it to 0. It is good practice to initialize the value of an integer. That way, if they don't enter a value, it doesn't crash if the compiler doesn't assign a value automatically. If you're doing any type of, if you're in a programming class and you have to write code on paper or you have to devise any kind of code, they're most likely 9 times out of 10 going to want to see a value initialized when you create an integer. So that aside, let's go ahead and tell them to enter their age. So we're going to say, please enter your age. Because we need to know their age, because once we know their age, we can let them know, hey, these are the movies you're allowed to see. Now, my age becomes, and we're going to refer back to that scanner that we created, and next int, because we are getting an integer. That is how you store an integer. Now that we have that, we can get into our single selection statements. Now, just because we call them if statements or single selection statements doesn't mean you can have one. You can have multiple. If you're going to have multiple, you want to make sure your code runs efficient. So there's a couple different things we're going to learn here in the next 5 or so minutes. Let's start with the if statement. It has to be inside of a method. It can't be outside your method if. You open your parentheses. Inside here is the condition that must be met. If that condition is true, then everything inside the curly brackets within our if statement will execute. Now, right now I have an error because I don't have a condition. So let's create our condition. The first thing we need to test for is G and PG movies. So if someone is older than 0 and they're less than 13, they're allowed to see G or PG movies. So if my age is greater than 0, and now Java has 2 things. It has a single ampersand and it has a double ampersand. We're going to use the single ampersand and talk about why you should not use the single ampersand. If you're going to learn a language, you need to learn as much as possible about the language and why things work that way. So if they're greater than 0 and they're less than 13, then we're going to let them know you can see G and PG movies. All right, we're good to go. Now let's talk about this single ampersand for a second. The single ampersand works like this. So this is logic programming. It works off logic gates. If you've done any logic gates, this will make perfect sense. If you haven't, I suggest you review Boolean expressions, because in order for this to result in true, both conditions must be true. That's how AND works. This and this must be true. Now with the single ampersand, getting back there, here's what your code does. It checks to see if my age is greater than 0. Then what it will do is check to see if my age is less than 13. Then the next step it will do is compare these two and then decide if it's going to result in a 0, a false value, or a 1, which is a true value. If it results in a true value, it will then execute this. And you may be saying, okay, well, so what? Well, the double ampersand is more efficient, and here's why it's more efficient and why you should use it. If my age is greater than 0, if that statement is true, it will then move on to the second one and follow the rest of the steps. If my age is not greater than 0, it will not even check the next one, because in order for the AND Boolean expression to result in true, both of these must be true. Well, if the first one's not true, there's no point in wasting processing time to check this one when we know it's going to result in a false value. So with the double ampersand, it will only check the second one if that first one is true. So that is why you want to use the double ampersand and not the single ampersand. All right, what we're going to do next is we're going to create another if statement. Now we said you should be blocking these together, and we'll talk about why you want to block these together in just a moment. So let's do, and it's a very easy fix. If my age, if they are greater than or equal to 13, and they are less than 17, we're going to let them know what movies they can see. And they can see G, PG, and PG-13 movies. Those are the movies they can see. Now, I just told you want to block these together. Here's why you want to block these together. When you have separate if statements, each of them are going to be checked. So for example, we say we enter the age of 8. This if statement is going to run. After this if statement runs, it's going to print out this line. The next thing it's going to do is it's going to continue and check this if statement. Well, this if statement doesn't need to be checked if there ain't and the first one has already run. So how do we fix that? How do we keep this if statement from using the processor and using precious runtime? So we simply do this. We type in else if. The only way this will execute is if this first one is false. If this first one does not execute, then it will check the next one. And we're going to use another else if, because maybe they're 17 or older. So if my age is greater than or equal to 17, then they can see everything. They can see all the movies. So we're simply going to output that to the user. You can see G, PG, PG-13, and R movies. Now remember, I said I left off the NC-17. If you want to put that in there, you can. You just add in NC-17. Now there's something else we need to account for, and that is, what if they enter a negative value? -5, we don't just want to leave a blank space. We want to let them know that's not an acceptable age. Well, we don't use else if. We use else, which will save us a lot of time. When we use else, we don't have a condition. Meaning, if they don't type in something that's between 0 and 13, if they do not type in a value between 13 and 17, if they do not type in a value that is greater than or equal to 17, if they type in anything else, which would be a negative value, we need to let them know. We don't have a condition here. We go straight to what will execute. So if they type in anything else other than what we have outlined in our previous conditions, here, here, and here, this code will execute and we'll say not a valid age. And we're good to go. The last thing we need to do is simply test our code and see if it works. So we're going to compile, no syntax errors, beautiful. We can go ahead and run it now. So the first thing we'll do is age 5. We should be able to see G and PG. That should be the expected result. Perfect. It is. The next thing we're going to do is 13. 13 is right on the edge of that PG-13 movie. We should see G, PG, and PG-13. Perfect. Next thing we'll do is test on the bounds of the boundary of 17. Should tell us we can see G, PG, PG-13, and R. It does. Beautiful. The last one we need to check is a negative value, and it should say not a valid age, I think is what we typed in. Perfect. So it is working. When you're doing if statements, remember, if you have more than one, make sure you're using else if. The only way these will execute is if the first one does not work. If the first one doesn't work, it will then check the second one. If the second one works, it will not process the rest of these. This makes your coding much more efficient. That is how you do single selection, also known as if statements. The difference between the ampersand and double ampersand sign. If you have any questions, please post a comment below, and we'll see you guys in the next video.